You know nobody's coming ever to rescue you, right? Nobody gets a file.
Hanrahan Live.
Today we speak to Madeleine Stone from Big Brother Watch. She explains how the UK has become an authoritarian nightmare. I love Big Brother Watch. Like, I think all the stuff you're doing is like amazing. As I was saying, I don't really like any other group that does that, but I like what you do. Following it for years, but I've noticed like not a lot of people maybe outside of like the media sphere or like London seem to be fully aware of it. And it's like, I wish they would, you know what I mean? I think they should be. So like, maybe you can just kind of explain like what it is you guys do at Big Brother Watch.
Yeah, sure. So we are civil liberties campaign group, basically, and we look particularly at where civil liberties and human rights issues, particularly privacy and freedom of speech, come into contact with new forms of technology. And we are really committed to being non-partisan, not affiliated to any political party, trying to speak to everyone really in the UK. That's us.
That's what I like as well. There's no like weird politics behind it or anything like that. And you guys are a non-profit, right?
Yeah.
How do you even keep going?
It's hard,
Yeah.
especially like in today's climate with, you know, there's so many threats and we have to be quite strategic about what we focus on. I think there's so many things we wish we could do more on. So we have to be quite laser focused in what we put our energy into. We're a really small team as well, actually. A lot of people don't realise there's only 7 of us.
Really?
And actually when I joined, it was just me and Silky as full-time staff members. That was a couple of weeks after the lockdown was announced, and we had like a manic sort of 6 months where it's just the 2 of us working on COVID stuff, like all hours of the day, crazy. And we've kind of gradually grown over the years. But yeah, we're quite a small team, we have a kind of big impact, I think, for such a small team.
No, definitely. I didn't know it was a small team like that. What, like you said about like the main focuses, like what do you think is the biggest threat right now to like our civil liberties? I feel like there's never been so many.
Oh my God,
but,
that's a tricky question. I mean, the thing that I'm personally most worried about and that I spend most of my time campaigning on is the spread of facial recognition technology. And I mean, kind of surveillance powers in this country are mad. You know, obviously since Snowden's revelations and the Investor Powers Act normalising just kind of totally comprehensive surveillance of all of our digital footprint, essentially, that's obviously a terrible starting position. But now we're seeing more of this physical surveillance we have a huge CCTV network in this country. Increasingly new forms of kind of AI-powered biometric surveillance are being fed into pre-existing surveillance networks. You have live facial recognition being used by the police across the country. You've got private sector facial recognition. You've got retrospective facial recognition, which
What's that?
So live is basically live facial recognition is when there's a camera feed, every single person who walks past it, their face is turned into a biometric map. They're compared against a watch list. And that watch list would be different depending on whether the police own it or whether a private company owns it. The ones owned by private companies are just kind of made by themselves. The police ones we made up of custody images or social media photos. They can be all different kinds of things. With retrospective, what you have is typically a probe image, so like it might be a CCTV still or something, and then that one image will be searched against like a huge database. So it might be all the custody images, it might be the passport database, which we've found out in recent years has been going on for a number of years without anyone knowing about it.
Jesus.
It might be driving licence photos, which is something that the government is trying to potentially push through at the moment as well. So yeah, you have it in a live setting, or you can have it kind of after the event. They both have different issues and the fundamental concern is the kind of surveillance and privacy angle, of course, but with live, it's like a kind of real-time identity check of your face and comparing it to a list. With retrospective, although it's happening in not in a live context, you haven't got the potential for like a police officer to literally grab you in real time. There's the potential for it to be used to kind of track you and your movements in the past. So in theory, and this isn't how it's being used by the police right now, but you know, in the future it could be, and we've seen these things tend to ratchet all the time.
They never go down.
Yeah, it's always like, we've got this in place now, and then what's the new, like, Orwellian thing we can do with it? It could be used to essentially take your face and say, okay, where has Jake been in all the CCTV networks in the last year. Like, let's pinpoint his locations. And that is, a terrifying prospect, really.
Is it AI that would do that now, or do they manually have to do something like that?
So with facial recognition, obviously that itself is all like AI, it's all automated. Right now, I guess if they wanted to track your location, they would have to do that manually. But obviously the problem is with facial recognition is it's automated, it's so fast. The amount of data it can collect about you is staggering compared to what a human can do, and that's part of the risk here, right?
What I know it might sound dumb, but like, how is this allowed? Like, I wasn't asked, you weren't asked. Like, how is this even legal?
Facial recognition is in a really kind of bizarre legal situation right now where it's never been debated properly in Parliament. So there was one short debate in Westminster Hall, so not even the main chamber of Parliament, at the end of last year, because one MP put in for it. It wasn't like a government-led thing or anything like that. There's been a couple of questions in the House of Lords, but there's never been an actual debate on this in Parliament. There's no laws that mention the words facial recognition. Police have basically been able to experiment with this over the last 10 years. So that was when it was first trialled. I think it was at Wireless Festival by Leicestershire Police.
They trialled it at Wireless?
Yeah, I think Wireless. It could be download. Maybe I can fact check myself there. One of them. And it was, first done as a trial then, as a one-off. And then increasingly more police forces started to experiment with it. And that was really part of how we've ended up in this situation, particularly with the Met, because they said, oh, this is just a trial. Like, we obviously civil liberties, human rights campaigners were aghast that this was happening. Lots of members of the public were really unhappy about it too. And they just responded with any kind of criticism about, like, what's the laws around this? What's your parameters for doing it? It's just a trial. We're just seeing how long it lasts. This trial lasted, I think it was three years or something like that.
3 years, it's a long trial.
And there was no parameters for, this is a success of the trial, or this is what a failure is, or this is what we want to gain from it. It was just constantly drip, drip, drip across London and in South Wales of it being used. Then the pandemic happened. Well, suddenly they said, right, okay, we're going to use it now. There was no this is what we found, this is the benefits of it. It was just, okay, operational. Pandemic happened. It obviously had to stop for a while. When lockdowns lifted, they've just gone full throttle with it. And so the fact that there is no law on this is an absolute travesty. When it comes to our biometrics, so our fingerprints or our DNA, the way that the police can use those is actually really carefully regulated by primary legislation. It's had to undergo a full debate in Parliament, the full proper, so passionate, proper legislative, scrutiny that you would expect from parliamentarians and the public. And there's strict rules about when they can use it, how long they can keep the data. When it comes to our facial biometrics, which are arguably even more, the risk for them is more because it can be taken from a camera without you even touching anything. Like with a DNA or fingerprint sample, there needs to be some kind of physical contact there. But a camera, there's hundreds of thousands of them all around us every day. The potential for our facial biometrics to be exploited is so much greater. And yet there's been no interest from a whole range of governments in reining this in. They've just let the police crack on. So it's outrageous. And that's why we're bringing a legal challenge. We're supporting a legal challenge. So Sean Thompson and Big Brother Watch's director, Silky Carlo, is bringing a legal challenge against its use, and we've got permission now to go to the High Court, and we're taking the Met to court.
That's amazing. What will happen though? Say you win, will they have to stop, or?
Ideally, that would be fantastic.
But they've not even got permission to do it, so I just feel like...
Essentially, yeah. The problem with a legal challenge is what you'll get out of it will be a statement from the court, basically either declaring the Met are using this lawfully or unlawfully. Obviously, we think they're using it unlawfully, and we want the court to make that same statement. We think hopefully they will. And then the Met, seeing that, should turn around and say, okay, we're not using it lawfully, we'll have to stop. There's a whole kind of realm of possibilities in between that about what the court says and how the Met will respond to it. There was a legal challenge against South Wales' police use of this technology that Liberty, the human rights organisation, brought a few years ago. And that found that the South Wales police had been using it unlawfully. They violated human rights law, data protection law and equality law. And they essentially said, okay, we're just going to tweak our policies a little bit and crack on. So you know, that was really disappointing, and that should have been a real moment for the government to take stock of this. They've been, you know, the whole range of governments since this was first trialled have had the chance to get a grip on it. We now have the promise from this Labour government that they're looking at creating a legal framework for its use. What that will look like, we don't know.
What does that even mean, really? It sounds like nothing.
It's worryingly vague, yeah. And, you know, if we don't think there's any place for this at all in the UK or in any democratic country, but at the very minimum, if you think that there's a place for it, you need to make that democratically, you need to get the public's consent, you need to debate it in Parliament, there should be proper guidelines. It's just like crazy that this technology is so intrusive, it totally reframes our relationship with public space, with the police, with surveillance, with our kind of fundamental rights, that the police are literally allowed to write their own rules about who goes on watch lists, where they put it, you know, how long the deployments last, the reasons for a deployment. They can do what they want with it. And that in a democracy is
it's not a democracy, right? Like, so there's no parameters, like they have no guidelines other than their own. So
the College of Policing, which is a kind of oversight, they're not like a government department or anything like that, they're sort of a quango body, they have written some kind of very, very vague guidelines about what police should do. They're not like legally enforceable.
Right.
But even those guidelines are absurdly permissive. You can get victims of crimes on watch list, you can get witnesses of crimes on watch list. A potential witness of a crime could be anyone.
Yeah.
And then as well as, you know, every category of possible criminal, or not even a criminal, you can be at risk of causing harm. Like,
what does that mean?
There's no criminal threshold for this. Harm could be anything the police want it to mean. And, you know, we've seen how they've interpreted these things in the past. So, you know, that doesn't inspire much faith. And then each police force using it, and now there's a handful across the country, they will also have their own specific policies per force. And those have been written by the police force, and they're all just completely different. So we've got this patchwork. Even if you loved facial recognition, I don't see how anyone can think this is a good position for something this controversial.
No, you'd want some like uniform like guideline,
And
especially
you think the police would want it. Like
they
want some certainty, because they're being subject to legal challenges left, right, and centre because people are being misidentified or they're not using it kind of in conjunction with the law. So the situation is untenable, and we're putting pressure as much as we can on this government to take it seriously. You know, there were some positive noises when they first came into power, you know, saying that we understand the concerns around this, around discrimination, around privacy. We're looking at it. It's now turned into like a framework, you know, when
it's basically the same, right?
We'll be scrutinising it when it comes out, and we'll be pushing, you know, for the best outcome possible. But yeah, it's a difficult one, and you know, the status quo right now is just like, it's not good for anyone. So
it's really scary. I mean, I was reading on Big Brother Watch that people have been misidentified, right? Like told they're criminals when they're not. Like what happened with that?
Well, so we've seen that happen a lot of times. So I've been going to the actual deployments of facial recognition. So when they have a van with a CCTV, it looks like a kind of CCTV police van, but it will say live facial recognition on the side. And I've been going to those deployments for probably about 7 years now. And I've seen multiple occasions people being flagged by the police by facial recognition, grabbed, told you're wanted, and then you're in this perverse position where you're having to prove to the police that you're innocent rather than them proving you're guilty, which is how criminal justice is supposed to work in this country. That's hard to do. Like, you know, I'm not that person. Okay, prove it. So what, you have to show your ID card. They ask for fingerprint scans. You know, there's no obligation to do that. And that's exactly what happened to Sean Thompson. And he's the guy who we're supporting to bring a legal challenge against the Met. So my colleague Silky Carlo was at one of the deployments. We went through a period where we were trying to go to all of them, essentially. Now they're happening so frequently that we just don't have the capacity anymore. But we were, you know, one winter going to every deployment, which meant going to Croydon like 3 times a week. Which,
not good for anyone.
Which wasn't like the most fun part of my job. But this one was actually at London Bridge Station, and it was one evening, I think in January. And Sean is an amazing guy. He is an anti-knife crime community volunteer. So in his spare time, him and this organisation called Street Fathers will go around the streets of London, kind of build up a relationship with young people and try and divert them away from knife crime.
I've seen them, they're amazing.
Yeah, they do really, really good work, and it's all about building a relationship with people, you know, getting that community trust, the complete opposite of what the Met are doing right now with this technology. And that's something Sean has said, like, why are you pointing a camera in these people's faces? You should be building up relationships with them. But he was coming back from a shift with Street Fathers when he was misidentified, and he was immediately surrounded by police officers. He was told you're wanted. He said, what for? And they said, that's what we're here to find out. And he was held for about half an hour, just very calmly saying, you've got the wrong guy, that's not me in the photo. And them saying, well, we need your ID. He didn't have any ID on him. He's not obliged to carry it, to show it, although that could change soon, but we can get into that.
ID cards,
yeah. And they wanted to scan his fingerprints, and he said, you know, you don't have the right to make me do that. I don't want to scan my fingerprints. But he, you know, you can imagine how some people in that situation would get quite upset and agitated. He stayed calm, and Silky was there filming the whole interaction. And eventually, a family member like emailed him a picture of like his passport or something convoluted like that. And eventually they kind of relented and said, oh, okay, like, off you go. At the same time, they also misidentified someone else.
While he was being held.
Yeah. And, you know, Sean's a black guy, and he was saying the way that they spoke to this other guy who was misidentified was white was very, very different.
I bet, yeah.
So basically, Sean, you know, is really unhappy that this happened to him. It was really stressful, really embarrassing. He's compared it to like stop and search on steroids, like all the discriminatory problems with stop and search, but fueled by an algorithm.
Right, it's got to be worse than that, right? Because it's like stop and search is bad enough as it is, but when it's just a little camera, computer, AI, like that's insane. It seems so. It's like making a bigger gap, I feel like, between like police and communities. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like they don't care.
I mean, the Met have just announced they're going to be cutting like hundreds of frontline officers. They are in a crisis of public trust. The idea that the solution to that is getting rid of officers who could like build trust with communities, get to know an area, you know, that's what policing should be about. Instead, they're replacing officers with an algorithm and a camera pointed at the people of London. I mean, obviously, it's not just happening in London, but the mayors who we're challenging, and, you know, they've got such a difficult relationship with Londoners for very many reasons. It's the total opposite of the direction that I think most people want and think policing should go in, and that actually is effective policing. It hasn't got any kind of like investigative or intelligence gathering functions. It's just a scanner scanning every single person and hoping essentially that criminals or whoever else they're looking for, not just criminals, but happen to walk straight up to the van, which is kind of
in one spot for a couple hours.
It's kind of a silly, you know, take on policing that you know, and I've been to these deployments that have said what you have is dozens of officers standing around looking at their phones, waiting for it to ping and say there's a criminal. Like, how much more useful purpose?
I could do that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, like
anyone could do that.
They don't get very much training on like how to. I think they get like a day's training or a couple of hours training on how they should be, like, you know, speaking to people, because of course they can't arrest someone based on a match. What they're supposed to do is use it as a kind of prompt. And this is what the Met always say, right? Facial recognition, it's not making the decisions. There's a human in the loop, like the officer makes the decision. What I've seen time and time again is police are excited by their shiny new toy. Oh, ping, this person, run, like they all swarm this person, grab him or her, but usually a guy, usually a black guy. Actually, we've seen largely it's people being misidentified are young black men, yeah, you know, in keeping with the Met's kind of history of discrimination. And they swarm this person and they'll say, you know, you're wanted, and it always starts on the foot of like the technology's right, you're a wanted criminal,
right,
and, you know, prove to us that you're not. And that's obviously what the Met will deny, but that's what I've seen time and time again. I actually once, in one really harrowing case, saw like a woman who was, I think, 7 months pregnant being like shoved up a shop front and like held. And the way that the police interact with people when this technology is in play is often really disrespectful, aggressive. You know, they think the technology is always right. Another incident was of a 14-year-old black schoolboy in Romford. That was actually captured in a documentary on Netflix called Coded Bias, which, if you haven't seen, is worth a watch. Actually, at the time, there was an independent review of this technology going on. They'd brought in some academics to do a review of it, and this academic saw this unfold, and he actually said in his report, you know, the operator inside the van was telling the officers that's not right. That's not a match, even though the technology's pinged, that's not this person.
An operator that knows, like...
So there's a person in the van with the camera on,
Right.
and they're like watching this sort of do its work, and they'll be the ones kind of seeing it on the bigger screen, and then that's fed into all the phones of the
Right.
officers in the area who are part of that deployment. And so the operator in the van, who's like a sort of technician, was saying, oh, that's not right. But the officers just did it, and they went and grabbed this 14-year-old boy anyway, absolutely traumatised.
I bet.
He was, you know, misidentification. And he's probably left with the feeling of like, well, not only are the police racist, but also the algorithms they're using are racist as well.
Yeah, and like pouncing on him for nothing.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, they were plainclothes officers. He probably thought he was being like mugged or something.
Yeah, probably.
Terrifying. Asked him for ID, he's 14, he's like, I've got my school tie. Like, you know, he doesn't have anything. So when it goes wrong often, and it can be really devastating for people.
Where's the technology from? Like, where do they get this stuff?
So there's a couple of different algorithms being used. The main one is an algorithm called NeoFace that's provided by a Japanese company called NEC. Essex Police are using technology from a company called Coresight, which is an Israeli company. And we've seen the same technology, you know, the same company being deployed in Gaza as well to identify people. So obviously, like, human rights concerns have been raised about that. Then there's these kind of retrospective systems that are a kind of mishmash of different people. But again, because there's no like proper oversight of this, police forces someone can bowl up and pitch them a tech company can say, I've got this great new solution. You know, they'll invest in it, and there's no kind of like, well, independent, even accuracy testing of this. There's no requirement for the police to buy stuff and then it to have already been like independently vetted to prove that it even works. And that's with facial recognition. That's also things like, you know, predictive policing algorithms and these kinds of technologies. Across the public sector, there's a problem there because a lot of public authorities are so strapped for cash. They're really vulnerable to these sales pitches by these kind of tech companies that are selling kind of snake oil AI products that don't work, or if they work, they're really discriminatory, or they require like sucking in all the personal data of everyone in the area. And they don't have that kind of expertise or knowledge or independent analysis to say, hang on a second, this technology like doesn't work, or this is, you know, really appalling ethics-wise. They'll just buy it because they're being sold this dream of efficiency of like
it's going to make your job easier.
Yeah. You know, this is why the police are doing it. They think it's going to make them more efficient. But you know, I would say start by actually turning up to burglaries. That's like, if you want to be more efficient, that's probably a good place.
Yeah, like very basic. Yeah, like how expensive are these kind of things? Do you know?
It's hard to get a proper gauge of how much it's costing because the Met. We've tried over and over again to say like how much does each deployment cost? Because I think it would be very instructive to see, you know, how many arrests are you making per like hours given to deployment, and like given the fact you've got maybe like 20 police officers at each deployment's like 6 hours. I'm not very good at mental maths, but
it's going to cost a lot of money.
And there's 3 of these a week, and like, you know, maybe sometimes they're making like 5 or 6 arrests, but those policing hours, how if they were spent in other ways. Actually, I mean, you know, we don't want to boil this all down to like economics and cost-benefit analysis. There's much bigger problems here, but I think it's, you know, the Met are making this really strong pitch and other police forces and increasing the Home Office that this is like the future of policing. It's going to save us so much money, but actually, you know, these kinds of deployments are actually quite expensive. The tech itself is, you know, hundreds of thousands, and the Met have probably spent millions on it. And then when they're having to like defend legal cases as well, you know, that's going to bring up the
Well,
cost.
that's why I asked, because it's our money, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, we paid for that.
Yeah.
Paying for our own spying without any permission. Like, why is this not like, this is a scandal. Like, but it isn't, if that makes sense.
I think it's part of what I said about that kind of slow build-up.
Right.
Like, it's kind of it's been around in the UK actually for 10 years, which is like a crazy amount of time to think about it. But it's been happening so slowly, and the police have always said it's an experiment, it's a trial, we're just doing it at this one-off event, we're going to see how it goes. Then, we never get any proper feedback about what the impacts were or like how people felt about it. We just get maybe arrest numbers or even that we had to push to get that data. And now police forces will often publish it, but that's because we spent so many years sending FOI requests over and over again.
You shouldn't have to take that.
Yeah, no.
Like, and arrest doesn't mean convictions, right?
Oh yeah, and this is the other thing, of course. Like, the Met are, will often trumpet their arrest numbers, but if you actually look, how many people were even charged? Of those people, how many people actually were convicted? Those numbers, they start to plummet pretty quickly.
I bet.
Because there's a bigger problem with the criminal justice system here that, you can't paper over the cracks with shiny new technology.
No, you can't. It feels to me, I don't know if it's just because I'm quite focused on this. Like, I really, really hate this intrusiveness. It's like one of the key things. I just feel so, like, you kind of feel it, like yourself, like, this is insane. I don't know if it's just me because I think of it like that, but it does feel almost like the government has switched from making excuses to a kind of so what attitude. Do you know what I mean? Like, I do feel like, maybe they're not saying that, but I feel like something has changed. It's almost, I think even globally, maybe like in the West or whatever, there feels like this vibe of like, what are you going to do about it? I mean, the fact that they put it out so brazenly, and it's just bizarre to me. Like, it just feels like, how is that even possible? But it is, I don't know. Do you think there's some kind of like change in the attitude from the government?
This government or government?
Well, yeah.
I mean, this government has got a real authoritarian bent. I think, there's a lot of different political reasons for that, and, what their strategy is there. I don't think long term it's going to work for them. I think a lot of people are very unhappy about it. Yeah, I mean, I think access to justice in the UK is difficult. I mean, bringing this legal challenge, it's, there's probably an awareness that if you want to challenge, the Met Police, it's extremely expensive. I mean, we've just had to, to crowdfund £70,000 to support Sean and Silky's legal challenge, and that's just to get it out the gate. So another area where it's very difficult to challenge is retailers' use of facial recognition, and that's, I mean, in terms of misidentifications, these are just coming through constantly now. We're getting, I think, I've had two this week come into the inbox of Big Brother Watch. We're getting dozens and dozens of people, and that's even more difficult to challenge because it's a private company, and you get bogged down in really exorbitant legal fees. So
and they can just operate freely.
Well, this is another. This is the other side of facial recognition, is that you've got the police doing it, but you've got private companies doing it, and there's no law in any of it. And so, whether you can say it's worse or better with the police using it, I think they're both bad in different ways. Because the police obviously have the power to arrest you and ruin your life, but there is a little fraction of more of accountability there, and they're subject to the Human Rights Act, the Equality Act, and Freedom of Information Act, so we can get a bit more information out of them about what's happening, and they are supposedly publicly accountable. But with private companies, they're absolutely just saying crack on, and they're extremely brazen about it, and there's even less kind of oversight about how they're using it. And I mean, we've seen so many people get in touch with us for being put on these watch lists for just either it works with a shop worker will put you on the watch list, and then you're on a blacklist for all the shops in your area.
What?
And there's no burden of proof, there's no due process, you're not told.
In case of shoplifting or something.
Yeah, but it's so many people, they just get put on the watch list and they didn't do it. So either maybe someone else in the shop shoplifted at the same time, they got put on by mistake. In some cases, it's completely unclear. I had there's a guy from Wales who's just gone public with his story, was accused of putting stuff down his top, and he said immediately, I want the CCTV. CCTV, he didn't. And there's, he just went and bought some cat treats, I think it was, and went out. And he was like, why on earth how did I end up on this watch list? And they don't, the shop won't tell him. FaceWatch, the company who run the technology, won't tell him. He doesn't know. So, yeah, the path to justice is really hard. And I think that makes governments and companies as well, very, very brazen about this stuff.
Yeah, that is absolutely mental. Like, a private company can just scoop up your facial data and be like, you're on a watch list now.
Yeah.
That is insane.
Well, they won't even tell you until you, until you get marched out of the shop by security.
How embarrassing,
Yeah, I mean, we've had people who it's happened when they've been with colleagues. We've had people when they've been with their elderly parents.
Oh God.
Absolutely, people ringing me up sobbing, being like, my mum, she's been kicked out. She doesn't know what to do. English isn't her first language. She doesn't know how to get off of this. For vulnerable people, it's hard enough for anyone, but if you're elderly or you have mental health problems, or English isn't your first language, trying to navigate to get yourself, again, proving your innocence to a private company is
which
really
you shouldn't
hard.
have to do.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to do, of course. Having to go through that process is really hard. And I imagine that probably there've been quite a few people who haven't felt able to do it and have just been I guess I'm on this watch list now.
Right, yeah. It sounds to me like it's I don't know if it's the way it's implemented, but for some reason just common sense goes out the window because the machine says something.
Yeah, and that's a very well-known fallacy. I mean, it's what happened with the Horizon scandal, where if a computer says something and even if you think it's wrong, as humans, we sort of have this trust in it and we think that technology is this neutral, infallible thing, even when we know that the technology isn't always right. And there's obviously been so many well-documented things of it. I think studies have shown that doesn't seem to even deter us from trusting in computers. So, we seem to kind of... and that's why this stuff is so dangerous, right? Because of that fallacy and because, we tend to trust it. And that's why when people say, there's a human in the loop, quite often that's just a rubber stamp for a decision that's been made by a computer. And
if the human's a fucking idiot, by the sounds of it, some people are
a double whammy of awfulness. It's
scary. I mean, I do wonder if people realise, you get people that say things like, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, why do you care? And I remember my granddad, God rest his soul, he died now, but I remember him saying to me, he said, people that think like that don't realise what you're doing on Monday, the law could change on Tuesday, and it's the same thing, but now it's wrong. I mean, I know it's difficult, but how do you try and get through to people like that, or do you?
Yeah, I mean, that question, I've had that so many times.
It's hard, man, I've tried.
Yeah. I think, something like what happened to Sean or the people that I've told you about in these shops, that's a classic example of if you might have done nothing wrong, but it could make mistakes. And with AI and technology, it can and does make mistakes, and that can absolutely mess up your life. And miscarriages of justice have always happened. Now they're AI fueled. And so, that's... Yeah, and as you say, laws can change. What's right and what's socially acceptable one day can be very different, in a couple of years' time. I also think that, it's a sensible decision to not build the architecture of a police state, even if you live in, the most benevolent, democratic, like we live in now, of course, government that, respects all of our rights and wouldn't dream of trampling on our human rights at all or anything like that. Don't build those systems trusting that it could never happen here, because it's such a kind of arrogance almost we have in the UK of those sort of things, they wouldn't happen here. They can, history changes.
I was telling a friend about when the police crime sentencing and courts bill came out, and that I lost my mind over that. I couldn't believe. I got really annoyed that Brits were just whatever. It should have been chaos on the streets for what was happening, and it just went through, nothing really happened. Unfortunately, sadly, a few people in Bristol ended up in prison over the riots that happened over it. But other than that, it was, I went to one protest, it was just twee little placards, for Instagram. It wasn't a real thing. But anyway, I looked into that.
I hate Instagram placards.
I hate it, yeah. Fucking off. Oh, get the fuck out of here. It does my head in. The twee middle class placard. But I was saying to my mate, it was what does it even matter? You're not a criminal. I was like, mate, this shit is the same law they have in Russia and Turkey. Like, these are authoritarian countries. And then when I kind of flipped it like that to it, the thing that really got me was the decibel thing, so the noise.
Yeah.
So if the police decide it's too noisy, but again, like you've been saying, there's no guideline for what's too noisy.
Yeah.
They could
It's
literally
totally up to
say a
discretion.
whisper is too noisy,
Yeah.
and it legally would still be right. So they can arrest a one-person's quiet protest legally with that. And I was like, that is literally a Russian law. They have the same law. And it's like, yeah, like, I mean, look at China, facial recognition.
Yeah,
We have it.
People like, it's so clear to people when they look at it in other contexts.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's-
That's bad.
It can be
Look
a bit
outside,
maddening.
yeah.
I mean, even like, this is a rant that I was having in the office the other day. We love Black Mirror in the UK. People are obsessed with it. It's like one of the biggest, when it comes out, it's like everyone's talking about it. I'm like, can you not see that?
Yeah, right.
Some of the things in there
yeah.
are already happening, and this is the kind of world that we're building. And so, yeah, it's the job of organisations like ours, obviously, to try and build those bridges and, and to, in people's minds, to say, I think no one wants to live in like a Chinese-style surveillance state, so we need to be so precious about our civil liberties and not just take them for granted and think, it couldn't happen here. Like, we're a different kind of country. There's no such thing as a different kind of country. It will always change. Who knows what kind of government we're going to have in that next election. You need to never put something in place that you wouldn't want your, political opponents to use against you, essentially.
Well, that's the thing, they never reverse anything really, do they? So like, let's say, who's gonna get in next? Fuck me, probably Reform, whatever, hope not, but whatever. They're not gonna go, let's tear down those facial recognition things. They're just gonna leave
I will
it.
actually say that I think the Reform they've made some noises against facial recognition.
But are they gonna do anything?
We'll see.
Do you know what I mean? They all do that, they all make the noise.
Never
but
put your faith in, political
Yeah,
parties,
like,
but
I
they
don't know,
say that they want to get elected, no.
I don't trust any of them. It's just, I was looking through it and it's like, I don't really see like anyone going like, that was really bad and now we'll get rid of it and then getting rid of it,
It's so hard to row back on this stuff once the system's been built. I mean, one time when there was a victory on that was ID cards, and that's
Right,
that's what
that wasn't that Blair?
Yes.
I remember
was.
it vaguely.
Blair's fingerprints are all over these new plans again. The Tony Blair Institute have been, very influential on this debate. As it comes up time and time again. It happened with like COVID passes.
On all this?
Tony Blair Institute is pushing for facial recognition.
Really?
Technology, yeah. And they are, very committed to digital ID, and that's something that, and other Labour groups and other political parties, other kind of political groups as well are interested in it. But this is something that has been a political project of Tony Blair since he was Prime Minister, and he introduced it, and there was a massive civil liberties argument about it then. He got it through, and then the coalition came in and scrapped it. And so sometimes you do push back, and that's why I think it's so important to have those arguments. And sometimes it can feel a bit like we're in a losing battle. Like with COVID passes, for example, we fought so hard against those, and we were, obviously gutted when
Maybe
they
you can
passed.
talk about that, because I don't actually remember that. I mean, I barely remember.
There were so many.
COVID was just
Sometimes I have a flashback and I remember like some insane thing that a police force did, and I'm like, oh God. It was my job. I wrote monthly reports basically on civil liberties during coronavirus, which, as you can imagine, those reports got bigger and bigger.
Oh, it was insane.
Yeah, and it was a really scary time, and we were really worried about COVID passes, so much because we thought it would be like the, usher in digital ID, it starts with a health.
Sorry, what was it though? What was the COVID pass concept? I forget.
Like if you were vaccinated, you would prove your vaccination status to get into places.
Oh yes, yeah. Like if you want to go Tesco, you have to. Yeah. I remember
to prove
now.
that you were fully vaccinated.
Insane.
Yeah, and we oppose it on a kind of fundamental civil liberties ground. You shouldn't have to show your health status to access, public services in public places, and also on a kind of discriminatory grounds. A lot of people wouldn't have wanted the vaccine for a myriad of reasons.
It's up to
and
you.
It's up to them. It's up to them
exactly.
what they do, and you shouldn't be coerced by the state into any kind of medical procedure that you don't necessarily want, or maybe you can't have. That was a huge campaign. We did a lot of campaigning during the COVID years, and that's what probably a lot of people would know us for. Against when lockdown laws were excessive. I mean, half the time they were enforced without any legislation, or police were just doing whatever they wanted and there weren't any rules. But we did a lot of work around that time on contact tracing and plans to have a centralised system where the government would hold all the data about all of our movements. There was, complete onslaught, and that was kind of one of the final pushes. And, it was the biggest rebellion of Boris Johnson's government, I believe, and one of the biggest rebellions since the Brexit rebellions, but it did go through. But it only lasted a few months, and it was so unpopular that they scrapped it after a few months. So sometimes those victories, that's why it's so, as I was saying, so important to have those fights as strongly as you can, because sometimes things are rowed back on, and that's what we have to believe in. Otherwise, it would be very hard to keep fighting and stuff.
Well, definitely. I think as doomerish and nihilist as I get with this stuff, when I see what people like yourselves are doing, it's like, well, at least there is this thorn in their side that they can't forget. You need it, right?
You need to have a strong civil society, and I think we saw actually, again during COVID, in parts of Europe, restrictions were far more draconian, and I think it is partly because they don't, some of those countries didn't have that strong civil society that would push back against the government doing whatever they wanted, and so it's really important to have those arguments and to have those discussions. Even if you might not win now, Tony Benn famously said, there's no final victory on civil liberties. You have to restate the same arguments over and over again.
Yeah.
And it's, can be grueling sometimes, people who care about these things, but you just have to keep going and keep fighting.
Yeah, no, I think it worries me though, I feel like there's maybe a lack of education, or maybe it's from the family level, I don't know. Certainly within my family, I was always instilled in me that you are a human being, you have your own rights, you don't need a boot on your head. It's very, but I find that, I don't know, I don't even hear those discussions so much these days, I don't know, I feel like almost, maybe it's the wrong perspective, but I do sometimes worry that Brits don't care anymore. I know obviously there are people that care, you see it, but that's people that already care, if that makes sense. I don't know, do you ever worry that we're going to get to a point where everybody is just so apathetic that it's the government can do what they want?
I hope not.
I hope not,
yeah,
but
I think we're in a very weird political moment right now that
me too, yeah.
So tribal. Also within Parliament, a lot of these, right now we don't have a huge number of really strong civil libertarians in Parliament that we maybe would have had. There are some, standout people who are great from across the, every political party. But those numbers are dwindling, and it's never good for civil liberties when the government has a really strong majority, because they can do what they want, and they have a lot of sort of very green MPs who are scared to defy the whip, and but I'm seeing some shoots, in the Labour Party at least, of people who are getting a bit braver on civil liberties. But yeah, I mean it's a scary prospect, and I think it is a weird political time, but I can't be too nihilistic, because I would just give up. I wouldn't be able to.
No, I'm glad you're not. That's why I asked you, because I just worry. And then, although sometimes I then see very misplaced civil liberties, I'll see people online saying, this is our freedom movement, this is the moment, blah blah. And then when you realise what they're on about, they just want the freedom to oppress someone else. And it's no, that's not freedom. I don't know. Like you said, it's a very weird time at the minute. I feel like England is kind of on this seesaw. It's going to go one way or the other, I don't know. I'm worried about it. I keep forgetting the thing. What's it called? The age thing. Well, the Online Safety Act. That I think we really got to talk about, because that is just people can't even. I saw someone couldn't access a subreddit about making their own cider because they would have to put their face in. Maybe you just tell us where did that come from? To me, it just fell out of the sky.
So it's kind of the culmination of actually some very long, and to anyone who's probably not in the kind of techie policy space, quite boring series of discussions. And I think that's kind of why it passed people by a little bit, is that it was kind of framed around, technology, internet, not the kind of sexiest stuff that people are going to get really, invested in. it started its life, I think, under David Cameron with talk about, online harms and a lot of talk about, wishy-washy talk about, children online and keeping them safe. And obviously there's like a serious problem with the kinds of stuff kids are going on online. But the solution that's proposed to this is like basically total censorship, age gating of the internet. And the Online Safety Act is absolutely vast. So the kind of provisions that came in recently, earlier this year, that caused so much backlash around age verification are one part of a bigger bill that has so many tentacles of kind of speech repression, essentially. It's a terrible bill. It's probably the worst thing that's happened to freedom of expression online in the last few decades for the UK. The age gating provisions specifically essentially are around certain kinds of content. Ofcom oversees the bill and how it's enforced. There's questions about how independent they really can be of the government. The government say it's not politically directed. Ofcom are their own body, but the government has all kinds of powers to like amend things and put pressure on Ofcom. So the risk of like political censorship is very high. And we've already, seen bits of that with, various kind of political speeches being taken down. I don't think that's necessarily was intended for it to kind of work out that way, but I think, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I think we've seen, I think everybody in the UK will be aware now that, there's essentially any content that could be harmful to kids in certain ways. Either you have to make it so that children can't access it, so that's with age verification. So that's either showing your ID to or your biometrics to a private kind of third-party verification service. And there are all kinds of these popping up all over the place. There's no way in hell that I would ever give my biometrics or my ID, even if I wasn't opposed to it on a kind of very principled level, to a random company.
It's insane.
Mental. No, I wouldn't do that.
No,
The security
you would
risks,
think sensibly.
The security risks are... It's extraordinary that this government is mandating now that, Brits who want to use the internet, if they want to use it without being blocked from cider-making websites or, But, even things like, Reddit threads for, like, survivors of sexual violence, they can't, if you're going to be in that position, you're very likely to be cautious about how you're giving out your data, and you're not going to want to give your ID to a random company.
Yeah.
We've seen paintings, we've age-gated, we've seen references to ancient Roman wars. As I've said, some like political speeches in Parliament around grooming gangs have been censored. So you're basically having to choose rock and a hard place. Do I just not have free access to, the internet and the information that it contains, or do I give over my deeply, deeply sensitive personal data to these third-party companies? And it's a really, really difficult choice.
It's mental, but like, it really, for me, the other day I was showing my friend, someone made this used the video game Metal Gear Solid to make like this kind of statement really about where they think like AI and facial recognition is going to go and like censorship on the internet and whatever. And it was up on some subreddits where I found it. So I sent it to my friend, and then he just sent me back a screenshot saying like, you must input your data to watch this. And we were like, fucking hell. Like, it was just so on the nose, I couldn't believe it. But VPNs like get away from most of it, right? I feel like this surely there's something else to this. I don't mean in like a conspiratorial way at all, but like, surely the government realised like everyone can just get a VPN and get past this. Like and they're saying often that it's because of pornography or whatever. Ironically, one of the guys pushing for this just got arrested for like abusing children. There you go. But it's like there's surely there's some other end game to this. It feels like it's just data collection, no?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what happens really is that the government are outsourcing speech policing to private companies.
Right, that's mental.
And those private companies, I was thinking about this recently. Google is like one of the most powerful, and Meta, the most powerful companies in the world. Most of their services are entirely free. How have they gained so much money, influence? It's obviously because our data is so incredibly valuable to them and they have so much of it. So what we would want to see is if you want to, make the internet a kind of a more rights respecting place in terms of like how much data is collecting in our privacy online, and also if you want to, try and cut the legs off of this sort of algorithmic sort of wormhole that people find themselves sucked into where they're scrolling, like it's rotting our brains, it's rotting kids' brains. Prohibit the really, really intrusive data collection practices that they're making them, all their millions off of, and using that to then shunt us down various rabbit holes. It's the model of these companies where they're feeding off of our data, using that to enrage us or suck us in. That is the problem here. It's not about giving those companies therefore power to, individually police tweets or Facebook statuses. If people are saying things online that are criminal, that should be dealt with criminal law. We don't need to empower Silicon Valley tech giants to become the speech police of British citizens.
Right. Why is like Zuck like my new daddy? Do you know what I mean? Like, why? It's mental. It's like, like even with my other project, Popular Front, we just get censored so much. It's unbelievable. And I'm just like, how is this even real? Like, we're at a point now where you have to like use characters like an exclamation mark rather than
block out certain words.
Like weird. This is so, and it's normal now. But I find that so depressing. Like,
it's really sad when you think about what the internet was supposed to be,
right, and what it was for a while.
How it started, and what it's become, and that kind of convergence of corporate power, and now with the Online Safety Act giving state backing to that. If the government was serious about keeping kids safe online, they would not be giving more power and influence to these tech companies. And they love to, make it sound like they're cracking down on them, they're sort of hammering them, or they haul them into Parliament and have a go at them, and say that we're reining in the tech giants. This is giving them more power than ever. It's giving them state backing. It's a disaster for free speech, and this age gating stuff is one of the more kind of visible elements of it. But there are all different kinds of, tentacles of this law that will come to bite as it gets enforced, further on.
I read that it's moving to the rest of Europe. Is that right?
I think there are kind of ideas for similar kinds of laws that are being proposed now, using the Online Safety Act as a model, which is very depressing to see.
It is.
British censorship being like exported out, and it also, it gives authoritarian regimes, or even more authoritarian regimes, more license to, introduce mass internet censorship, and we've seen like them referencing things like the Online Safety Act as justification.
Yeah. How can we be the big old West and be like, that's bad? It's like we're doing the same.
Yeah.
Like, I dare say it gives them ideas as well. It's crazy. The thing that I always think as well, like with the way the internet was meant to be this kind of like free flow of information, and it's kind of the opposite now. Like even if you think, well, social media, like there's all this stuff on there, but like you said, it's all rot. And I looked at some studies actually, and it was showing like the use of internet when it was more free versus now, and now it's just like, the internet was like this, now it's like this, because everybody's just using the socials. And the studies on it were saying that like the TikTok specifically is inducing like ADHD in people. Like they don't naturally have it as such, but they have like they have the same symptoms of it, if that makes sense. Surely that is, if they cared about children, they would ban TikTok. Now I'm not saying they should, but I don't think they should bring this in either. It just feels to me like just completely arbitrary. Like you said, I think it's just data. There's a lot of it going around. I just cannot believe that. Who is it going to save? Like, why is there no like kind of onus on the parents? Like, why don't we educate the parents? Why don't we teach them to like look after their kids? It just, again, like, I know it's kind of cliche, but the nanny state, it's like, we'll look after you by taking everything away so you don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just can't believe we got here so fast. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there are so many other ways of keeping kids safe online that don't involve totally child-proofing the internet for everyone. And not, child-proofing is probably too generous, to be honest, because it's as we've seen, it goes far beyond stuff that kids wouldn't be able to handle. I mean, if you look at the kinds of categories of speech that now have to be regulated or monitored. Ofcom require all different kinds of things for platforms to do to, to prevent children from, encountering this kind of content. The list of stuff is so expansive. Some stuff, obviously, you wouldn't want kids to encounter, but there's some stuff on there like depictions of fictional violence against fictional creatures. And, we were saying in the office, does that mean like Lord of the Rings kids can't watch? Because
Yeah. The orcs.
like orcs getting hurt, those kinds of things. I mean, it's this kind of very, very censorious nanny state approach to free speech that, I don't think is going to benefit kids in the long run. And actually there is a role here for, parental controls. I mean, I don't know what you had when you were younger, but I had...
Nothing, no, unregulated.
I had time control.
Yeah.
And I was allowed like half an hour a day on Facebook,
Yeah.
half an hour a day on MSN, and like, my parents were overseeing all of that. And those, I'm sure that if we dug into the problems with those too, but I think there are things there for parents to take more ownership and, and that's not a criticism of parents. I think it's like we want to empower parents,
Right,
educate them, to be like, I get that people are really, really genuinely worried about their kids and the stuff they're being exposed to, and I think this should be a moment for education and empowering people rather than like just being like, don't worry, we're just going to censor the whole internet so you haven't got to even think about it. I mean, they're not even doing a good job because it's not, kids will always find a way to, kids are always more tech savvy than their parents and certainly more tech savvy than this government. They're always going to find a way to access that kind of content, and it's the same arguments with any kind of censorship. Like, it's better to deal with the issue head on, bring it out into the light, talk about it, debate things, in the concept of children, talk to your children about these things rather than just trying desperately to, squash it all and hide it all, because you won't win.
No.
And you're not keeping kids safe and you're making the internet worse for everyone.
I hate it. It's annoying. The thing I notice it's done is like, I think a mix of the kind of like hyper-offended culture that we all had to go through for a bit and internet kind of censorship. I noticed a weird detachment from being an adult from a lot of people. So I can't bear to look at the Popular Front Instagram. We got like 500,000 followers and we deal with war and conflict and whatever. So we have like the worst people in the world commenting, right? Something I've noticed time and again is people being like, I don't run the Insta, our lad Victor does it, but like people are saying, why haven't you censored this? Someone said a bad word in the comments, why hasn't the admin removed it? And I'm like, you're a grown adult, just stop reading the fucking comments. And it's like, it's unbelievable that people literally think it's our job to make them feel a little bit better while they're wasting their time reading internet comments. And that's something like, I've really noticed, like when I was younger, if you said that, people would laugh you out the chat room. They'd be like, leave them, press the X. And it's almost like this expectancy that everyone will look after you now. And it's not just like hyper-offended people. It's the same with the, oh, you're triggered people. They're as triggered as anybody. They're always crying about something. And it's just this whole thing of like, just do something else. Like it's almost like the idea of it is just gone. And I feel like, I don't know, I guess my point is I feel like it's warping culture in a really dangerous way. I don't know if that's anything you guys notice with Big Brother Watch, but I see it a lot.
I think it's probably like a bit of a cycle of like some of that attitude feeds in towards the government, and then the way that the government talk about things, like with the way the online safety, like the framing of the Online Safety Act,
right,
like feeds into that. This
human centipede,
if you like, this like constant drumbeat of like, we need to keep you safe online. That probably is reinforcing that kind of approach. So I think it's hard to see where like one of those things ends and the other one begins, but there is definitely an expectation from some quarters that free speech is dangerous and it needs to be moderated, and that's certainly not just this government but successive governments' approach to free speech increasingly. As much as now I find it kind of hilarious, kind of like maddening to see former Tory ministers who ushered through this Online Safety Act now standing up and talking about the importance of free speech and police the streets, not tweets. And, I agree.
Yeah.
But, it's...
They don't believe in anything, I don't think. I think they just say shit. But that is interesting, though, that thing, like, have you been keeping track of that stuff of, like, people being arrested for, like, tweets and stuff? Like, I'll be honest, I didn't think it was legit. I thought it was just some, like, thing that like angry conservatives were saying, but it seems to be quite prevalent.
No, it is happening.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting is that all different kinds of pieces of legislation that were, so obviously we've got the Online Safety Act. This hasn't led to people being arrested, but older pieces of like public order legislation are now kind of being weaponized by, and it's across the political spectrum really to see people arrested. And I think it's this growing intolerance of free expression and people being, unwilling to hear the other side. It leads to scary places. Obviously, we saw today, like political assassination, essentially in the States, and the only response to that should be to have more free speech, more dissent. More
I agree.
debate.
Yeah.
If you care about democracy and human rights, that is the only response to any of these kinds of things is that we need to, reinforce and fortify our belief in freedom of expression. It's so vital, and it's very scary to see it being, chipped away in, obviously not as serious ways right now in the UK, but where this leads, and this from all sides, this intolerance for free speech is a very scary and dark place for a democracy to be in.
It is. It really is, and it's like. Obviously, you should still be allowed to have ideas, even if they're horrible, right? And it's like...
That's a classic, that's the classic line of free speech.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get any easier, like, whoever you're defending, whatever stage of society, whatever decade, whichever is the baddie at the moment, like, it's always hard to, like, stand up for those kind of people you don't like or you don't agree with, but... it has to be done, and you have to have that principled line, and this is critical.
Yeah, and I think Big Brother Watch for me is one of the few people that actually believe that, because you see people talking about free speech. It's very popular in like who's that shithead? God, I hate this guy, Tim Pool. He's like you don't want to know. He's like some right-wing commentator grifter, and all he says is like free speech. And then in the next breath, he's literally receiving money from the Kremlin, and it's just like he doesn't believe in free speech. And I found a lot of these people have weaponized the idea of free speech just to say, I want to be horrible about this person. Yeah, you can be horrible about them. You should be allowed to be horrible to them, but you don't actually believe in free speech. You know what I mean? And I've seen that happen quite a lot. With Big Brother Watch, though, I've always really when I found it, I really studied it. I was like, okay, they really actually do mean this. It's really interesting. I was wondering, I don't know if it's too personal, but I was wondering, how have you become this way? What is it where you were like, I really believe in this? Because I just find a lot of people are not like that anymore, Was there anything specific where you were just like...
how far back into the past you want to go? I think the Snowden stuff really shook me.
Right.
I guess I was only a teenager, but it... I will say the first ever adult book I read was 1984, so maybe that just sealed my fate. I think I was 14, asked for it for my birthday, I got that and The Handmaid's Tale, read them back to back, and that probably just that was me done then for the rest of my life. So, and then the Snowden revelations. I always cared a lot about human rights and being a good person. I always wanted to work for a charity, but I think as I got older, I was more thinking about sort of human dignity and the importance of individuals being able to have the human rights framework is one that is about dignity. It's not just about chucking money at people or whatever. It's about people having their own space to exist freely and to be their own people. And I think that's really important to me. And psychologically, maybe that was just George Orwell got into my brain at a young age, and that was it forever. But
no, I think that's a really good point. I feel the same. The dignity to be. Dignity can mean many things, but it's that I feel is sometimes. That's what's missing, I think, maybe from the people that say about free speech but don't really mean it. You know what I mean? It's the dignity to be a human being, to make your own choices, to be free, to not be bullied and hassled by the government all the time for nothing. I feel like that's a really important thing. For me, it was, I always believed that just the way I was raised. My grandfather was just this is how it is. You don't hate someone because of what they think or what they look like or whatever. I was very lucky in that respect. But for me, when I got sent to prison in Turkey for just doing my job, basically filming like Kurdish uprising, didn't do anything illegal, but whatever, put in prison, and to feel your rights taken, it was like physical, you know. And I remember one of them said to me, I was quite young, I was like 24, I was like, what the fuck, like we're British citizens, we got rights, so you can't do this. And the guy just said, you're Turkish now, like the prison officer. And I realized at that moment, I was like, you know how fucked up this is, but that's how it was. And I remember just thinking, wow, that is like a real terrifying prospect. And like, I got back to England. We weren't there long, like 11 days, it sucked, but whatever. And we got back to England, I never loved England so much. Like before it, I was like, I hate this place. But now I think that's maybe what I'm passionate about, like seeing your own country kind of, I don't know, just disappear into this kind of dark space. Do you feel like, I don't know, you must feel some kind of despair from it, right? Like, not to be negative, but I think you have to care about it a bit.
Yeah, I feel I've had definitely some very despairing moments, and I think, especially like during COVID, as I said, that's when I kind of first started working here, and it did feel like an absolute onslaught, and it's tough to watch these news challenges come on every front. And I mean, I think you have to really hold on to the small victories. And as you kind of were saying earlier, like, it's so important that there are, even if you don't win every fight, like having the fight is important. Because imagine if there was no one who was, no Big Brother Watch, but also no like people like yourself, or like people who care about this stuff, who are writing to their MPs, arguing about it, talking about it in, social media, or, in the media, in the press. Like, how much worse would it be, like, if the government had a completely smooth road?
True, yeah.
If there was no one, like, lobbing FOI requests at them, or like, demanding that they do a consultation, these kinds of things, they might seem small, but they add kind of roadblocks. And I think when they're thinking in their head of what can we get away with, knowing that, like, oh God, X and so this is going to kick up a fuss, it's going to make it really difficult for us. Like, I think you'd be surprised by how much that probably would influence, like, civil servants or the ministers who are thinking about these things. And I think that's how I kind of keep going at it, is thinking, like, you just, like, if you can just make it more difficult for them, if you can slow it down, you never know what might be the next thing that will come along, and that forces them to abandon these plans. So, that's, I think, holding on to those small victories is the only way to keep sane in this fight.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of asking for myself, to be honest.
Sorry, I can't offer too much.
No, I mean, it's realistic.
Getting outside as much as possible.
Yeah, definitely, that's a big one, yeah. Just go outside. Into the woods. I know, yeah, the woods, yeah. I'm a big advocate for that. Like, I always say, no matter who you are, where you're from, I don't know anyone that doesn't feel better after, like, a walk in the woods, like, it's
no
better.
No surveillance cameras there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, for now. Have you seen those conspiracy theorists? They think that, like, birds have got cameras in them.
I love that one.
They're amazing, yeah. But then I saw one where, like, there was literally some firm had made, like, a bird security camera, and he was on the forum like, I've been proven right. I was like, oh no, like, I couldn't believe it. It was amazing, but yeah, I don't know. The one thing I just want to, like, talk about, because it's coming up soon, is the ID cards. Now, maybe you can explain what Starmer's trying to do with that a little bit. I'm a bit out the loop on it. I just saw it and was like, oh, for fuck's sake, and just I should have read it, but I was like, not now. What is it? What's he planning? So, as I said, there's been kind of pushes for this kind of thing. They pop up fairly regularly, in that the argument of the day will be whatever is the problem of the day. So right now, the argument is that we need ID cards to stop the boats. Like, the logic of that is, we've done our research, we can't really find how they've come to that conclusion, but apparently it will stop illegal migration. In the past it will stop benefit fraud, or it will stop serious crime. Like, as is the way with a lot of kind of authoritarian proposals, they're always wrapped up in, like, whatever the language is of like the current social issue of the day. There's like a joke I saw on Twitter that was like, little old lady, her cat is stuck up a tree, Tony Blair, digital ID cards will solve this problem. That's the proposals. I guess the idea is that, well, there are no concrete proposals from the government yet. There've been a few kind of policy papers put out by a few different Labour think tanks. It
Tony Blair Institute and Labour Together are two that are really, really pushing it forward. Labour Together earlier this year published proposals for like a brick card, which should be a mandatory ID card basically for everyone in Britain, and the idea is that that would stop all bad things from happening, essentially.
Oh, it was that simple?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. But why did they want it? Obviously the reasons are just bullshit, like you said, but why did they want this? Just control?
I think there's a kind of technocratic utopian vision of a society where if everyone has like a number and a tag, then the government will run super efficiently. Everyone can kind of be shepherded in the right direction, kind of like, cattle on a tag, essentially. Like, of course, it's not being proposed as like it will be easier to control the population. And I think that there are genuinely some good intentions behind that. Of like, we know the British state is slow and old, and there's this idea that kind of with all these things, wherever technology comes into it, is like magical tech wand will be waved and all our problems will be solved. Everything will run super efficiently, but that's not how it's going to play out. We have it would fundamentally change like our relationship with the state. We'd become a papers please society, and we've always rejected ID cards in Britain, and time and time again, there's been plans to put them in place, and the British public have always pushed back against it, and they've been, abandoned. So we hope that was what happened again. We've actually published a report today called Checkpoint Britain about the kind of privacy dangers of an ID card. I guess we shouldn't talk about it as an ID card because that makes it sound almost innocuous, like, it's just a new kind of driving license. A digital ID, which would most likely be mandatory, and the Home Secretary, the new Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, said even a couple of days ago that she's in favour of ID cards. So we know it's something the government are thinking about a lot, and we are potentially expecting proposals to come out in the next few weeks. There's the two sides of it. So it would be the sort of front end where you'd have to show a card to essentially go about your daily life, to interact with the state. Every kind of interaction with the state or even with private companies, actually, because there's even been plans we've seen suggestions it could be used in relation to shopping or, these kinds of things. It would be a kind of identity check, but it's not just an identity check. It would hold potentially all of the data that the state has about you. So there's that kind of papers please society where we're going to be asked to show our papers, show who we are. We know, and this is what we see in other parts of Europe that have ID cards, is it's not, middle-class white young women like me who are going to get their ID cards checked every now and then.
No, of course not.
It's going to be it's going to probably give license to people who are, completely obsessed with illegal migration. Anyone who doesn't look white British, will be facing demands. Papers please, show me you belong here. Who are you? Yeah. It kind of emboldens that sort of racism from the public and also from police officers as well. Yeah. So there's that kind of daily interaction with the state that really changes how we interact with the state. And then there's the back end of it. And that would basically be the kind of convergence of all the data the state has about you into one place tied to your identity, kind of like a database state. So, Home Office could share data with the Foreign Office, could share data with DWP, could share data with, Department for Education, all of these things being tied together in one place. The risk of, misuse, hacking. I mean, who trusts the government to deal with their kind of personal data? Absolute honeypot for hackers. We actually commissioned some polling recently from YouGov. I think that 63% of the British public doesn't trust the UK government to manage their personal data. The remaining percentage must not have been paying attention.
It's not high enough.
We saw the Afghanistan data leak.
Jesus, God, I know.
Do we trust, frankly, like any government of any stripe to hold that kind of all of the data about us, a total map of our lives, potentially from birth till death, all in one access point with the state having access to it, tied to an identity card?
It's like a checkpoint that you carry with you, essentially, then, right? Like, it's even worse. God, I hope not. Sorry, I won't keep you any longer. Last question I want to ask you is, like, anyone that wants to get into this kind of work, anyone that is interested or believes in real civil liberties, real freedom, not just internet free speech, real stuff like you're doing, how would you advise them to get into it? Where should they start?
I mean, read as much as you can. Like, I'm a big reader, and like I know that. Oh, sorry, it's such a cliche to say read 1984. I'm sure anyone who cares about this has read it, but you know, start with. I think fiction is a really good place to start and to kind of understand these ideas. There's, you know, obviously 1984, Handmaid's Tale. There's a great novel called We by a Russian novelist that was meant to be the inspiration of 1984. I think reading about how these things work in fiction is a really good way of like figuring it out mentally. The dangerous points for these kinds of technologies and like what kind of world we could end up in. I mean, that might be because I'm like an former English lit student, so I'm always going to say that's like the place to start, but that's what I would do. I mean, in terms of like politically, practically things to do, become a Big Brother Watch supporter, of course. You know, we are, as I said, we're a really small team, small but mighty, but we need all the support we can get. So I would say join Big Brother Watch, you know, engage in the democratic process as much as you can. And I know that like, it feels so like being ground down and you're not being listened to, and it can feel a bit futile at times. And I feel like people roll their eyes if you say, write to your MP. I think like targeted letters about specific things that you care about written in your own language, they can't ignore it. And I think they will be thinking about, especially people who are in like, you know, if they're not a particularly safe seat, they will be thinking about, okay, do my constituents care about this? And that is something that will go through their head all the time. So, you know, don't harass them, obviously, and keep it relevant to certain things that might be going through Parliament. But I think try and engage, respond to consultations. I mean, yeah, it's not the perfect solution, but those kinds of things like don't sink into apathy. It's very easy to do, but you know, you need to engage wherever you can, have your voice heard wherever you can. So yeah, I guess read books, email your MP, become Big Brother supporter. It's not like the greatest list. I have to think about it a bit more. But.
No, I think definitely starting it with Big Brother Watch. I think Liberty as well. I really like
Liberty
actually.
Are great.
I joined. I can't remember what I joined up 2 years ago, but it's like got these booklets coming through, and even them like I gave it to a friend of mine who was in a problem with stop and search. Like he lived where he lived. I guess there's like some bad guys, whatever, where he lived. He's a good guy, never done nothing. Starts getting stop and search, and I just like randomly I was like, yeah, this might be useful. And it actually was, because it had like the rules of stop and search and what they can and can't do. Yeah, like, and I think I mean I agree. Like basic steps is educating yourself on what rights you actually have. You know, I think a lot of young people don't realise, and unfortunately sometimes they engage with these like, you know, like these police monitors and all this silliness. Yeah, like auditors, that's it. Forget all that, like I agree, like look at Libby, look at Big Brother Watch. But yeah, thank you so much. I love the work you're doing and I think it's amazing. Thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it, thank you.